Hey, Dave Hall with the Silent Warrior Foundation again. We are just to the right of Whiskey and War Stories. We're exhausted from all the effort. We had a great time. And we're in the middle of a cylinder and slide 1911 custom build class with my mentor, Bill Loffridge, right here.
Hi.
And we wanted to catch on film this kind of a special story that's all of us know, but we thought we'd share it with the group. Several years ago when I came out here for a Whiskey and War Stories event, I was introduced to retired Captain Doug Burns, United States Navy fighter pilot, former POW for 6.5 years. And Doug, during that time, we went out to breakfast with some friends. Doug probably spent a good 3 hours telling me all of the gory details about what it was like to be shot down over North Vietnam and be a prisoner of war for 6.5 years. And at some point in there, as fascinating as it was, it occurred to me that we had just met, and I didn't know how much interaction we would have in the future. And I thought, man, if he ever hears my name, it's going to be closely associated with the worst years of his life. So I thought I'd ask him a couple of questions that might broaden the subject matter a little bit, and I'm glad I did, because what I asked him was how he got interested in flying. And he kind of went back to his boyhood. He said something about you saw an airplane when you were on the farm fly over, and piqued your interest. But then he immediately started going in and talking about his dad, who was a hero in World War I. And he started specifically talking about his dad's combat actions in World War I and a particular heirloom his dad kept from the war, which is this 1911 that you see. But I'm going to let Doug tell the story. It's better to hear it from him. Doug, when was the first time you became aware of this pistol, and can you kind of tell the story about it?
I knew my dad had it, and when he died, I was in Hanoi when my dad died. He died a month after I was shot down, worried himself to death, and had a massive stroke. But when he died, my brother took the gun, and he had it until he died. And I had asked my sister-in-law if she knew where the gun was, and she said, I don't know. She said, I have a couple of guns here, but I think they're target guns. And when I went back from my brother's funeral, I said, okay, where are the guns that you have? And this case right here was where the gun was. And I opened it up and I said, that's it. But I didn't have any way to get back to Arizona. So Bill and Dave drove up to Loudoun County, Virginia, picked up the weapon from my sister-in-law. They took it all apart, and as it turned out, in the base of the weapon here, this spring right here only gets taken out at an armory, and this weapon had never been back to an armory. And when they took that spring out, they found dirt in there, and they figured it was from World War I in France.
I bet it was the dirt of France.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
His dad was recognized for his bravery in combat near Fismet, France. And so when Doug asked if we could get this thing back to Arizona, I felt like somebody had just turned over an hourglass, and I had no idea how much sand was in it. It was a race. So Bill wanted to throw in, so Bill hopped a plane and came out to Virginia Beach, and we drove like hell to get up there.
Specifically flew to Virginia Beach to see this gun.
Yeah. Then we met your sweet sister-in-law, and she turned it over, and she had a box, and in it was not just that, but the holster that his dad had used in World War I, the magazine pouches, 3 magazines. There was a pouch that had held his dad's wire cutters, which are pretty important for a World War I soldier to get through wire. So it was fascinating, and like Doug said, we went and took the gun apart in detail, inspected it, and it's really in remarkable shape when you consider what we discovered his dad went through. His dad had been gassed several times, we found out through the 28th Infantry Division archives, detailed every day of combat, and where we could place his dad in that combat and realize that he had been subjected to chlorine and mustard gas several times. And chlorine and mustard gas are really caustic. A lot of the times when you see an original World War I 1911, it'll be all pitted on the exterior surface from exposure to that. And really what this means is that his dad must have been one hell of a fastidious soldier, good soldier, to take care of his equipment that well. And so what was interesting then is Doug had also mentioned that the family at one time had the original citation, but somebody somehow got misplaced. So I had a good friend that was working in the Pentagon at the time in the Secretary of the Navy's office, and I asked him if he could help a former fighter pilot, and he was a fighter pilot himself.
Attack pilot.
Attack pilot, all right. And he and he said, hell yeah. So he went to his counterpart on the Army side of the Pentagon, and they looked up his dad's citation and drafted a new one. And Doug's gonna fetch it. I'll read it to you. It's pretty impressive. So what you're looking at here, well, I'll read the citation. Here we go. All right. So this is the actual citation. It says, the United States of America, to all who shall see these presents greeting, this is to certify that the President of the United States of America, authorized by Congress, has awarded the Distinguished Service Cross to Second Lieutenant, then Sergeant, Edward N. Burns, Company B, 111th Infantry, for extraordinary heroism in action in France on 10 August 1918. The citation of the specific actions I'll read to you. It's pretty impressive. Second Lieutenant, then Sergeant Edward N. Burns, United States Army, for extraordinary heroism in action on 10 August 1918 during combat operations against an armed enemy of the United States as an infantryman with Company B, 111th Infantry Regiment near Fismet, France, when the attack of his company was held up by fire from a hostile strongpoint. Sergeant Burns, with 2 other men, voluntarily cut their way through enemy wire entanglements under heavy fire, reached their objective, and engaged the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. During this latter action, 6 of the enemy were killed, and the attacking line was enabled to advance to the new position. At further risk of his life, Sergeant Burns carried back one of his comrades who had been fatally wounded in the action. Sergeant Burns' distinctive accomplishments are in keeping with the finest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, the 28th Division, and the American Expeditionary Forces. Pretty damn cool. So this gun right here was used by Doug's father to single-handedly take out 3 German machine gun nests. Typically 2 Germans per machine gun nest. And at some point later on in life, somebody tried to rob him and they got on the wrong end of that gun as well?
Yeah, he owned his own ice cream business. They had 30 stores in Philadelphia, and when he would go around to make the collections, he always carried his gun in his lap. And one day some guy came up to the window and pointed a gun at him. My dad picked up his .45 and just blew him away. And you could do that in those days. One other note, this holster that my dad used wasn't my dad's original holster. This holster that my dad later got would belong to a Lieutenant Sullivan, who was my dad's company commander, but he was killed. And somehow, or for some reason, my dad wound up with his holster. Now, my dad had his own holster, but something must have happened to it through the action or whatever, and why he wound up with Lieutenant Sullivan's holster, well, I don't know. But Dave and Bill actually wound up getting dog tags with my dad's information on it.
Yeah, I found your dad's service number in that.
And they had
archive book.
these are the way the original World War I dog tags were made, and they have all my dad's information on it. So, and then my sister-in-law and my brother had my dad's medals. A couple of these are from Pennsylvania, a couple of them are from the French, and I guess this is the Distinguished Service Cross.
Yep, and then Purple Heart.
Purple Heart, Distinguished Service Cross. But, you know, in those days, they weren't real big on metal in World War I. But I can't keep that thing upright.
Yeah.
But at any rate,
So this was kind of something that you would see your dad with when you were a boy. And I tell you, Doug looked like he was about 14 years old when he got this, and two good friends of ours who have since passed that you probably heard us talking about lately, Mike DiBenedetto and Rick Hetzel, set up a range day at the Scottsdale Gun Club for Doug, and he looked like he was 14 years old on Christmas morning shooting that gun. And they even put up a target that they had printed out of a World War I German machine gun crew for Doug to shoot at. It's pretty damn cool.
but, you know, that gun's got a lot of history to it, and it's been through combat action in World War I, training of troops going to Europe in World War II, which my dad was a lieutenant colonel at that time during the Second World War, but he trained troops up at Indiantown Gap. But that history that Dave and Bill got of the history of the division from the time they left the U.S. through till they got to England, over to France. My dad's company was embedded with a French regiment, and they went through some bloody action, and my dad knew then what real war was all about. He would never talk about it. I didn't know any of this stuff until these guys researched everything. But everybody, including myself, thought that the 28th Division was called the Iron Division because of the fact that it was Pennsylvania Iron and Steel. That isn't why they got that name. When my dad's company was embedded with the French general said, "These are men of iron." And that got back to General Pershing, and he's the one that named the division the Iron Division. So all this stuff is thanks to these two guys right here.
Well, really, what it comes down to is sometimes you have to know where you are in a conversation, and I felt so blessed and honored that Doug was sharing his worst 6.5 years of his life with me, and I didn't want my name associated in his memory bank simply with that bad time, so I thought I'd open the conversation up a little bit, and look what came from that. So we were able to recover this from a family member and get it back to him and share these experiences. Hell, that was about 4 years ago now. And I think everyone enjoys the story when they hear it. We got Jeff Cahill from Tango Down hanging out over here in the wings. It's probably the first time he's heard the story. But we wanted to catch it on film, share it with you guys, because it's one of the coolest things. And just to touch something that has such provenance and is so personal to Doug, and since he lost his father while he was in captivity, to be able to connect him with something so personal to his father in his lifetime was an honor.
Absolutely.
Well, my dad was a no-nonsense guy, but he would never talk about the war. So as I say, I didn't know any of this stuff until these two guys did all the research. But and I don't know that my brother really knew that much about what my dad and the war did in the war in World War I and all that stuff. So It's got a lot of history. I don't know what the gun's worth, but it's going to stay in the family. It ain't going anywhere.
Well,
To
Lower
me,
the camera down. I'll hold it this way so they can look down the business end. That's the last thing 3 German machine gun crews saw. And some poor, well, maybe not poor, but some criminal. Pretty damn cool.
that's all they used when they were attacking that area, because there was so much hand-to-hand combat involved that you couldn't use anything other than a sidearm.
close quarters battle.
All right.
You got
Well,
it. And that is for close quarter battle.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well,
So-
thank you for permitting me to take this apart and examine it, Doug. I just,
Oh, man,
I'm thrilled.
I've only fired it once over at Scottsdale Gun Club, and I probably won't fire it again unless it's in anger. And if I have to fire it in anger, I guarantee you it's going to put that individual down.
All right. We've got to get back to work. We've got some guns that we're building here. Kind of a later model unit gun clone, and Tracy's working on another Operation Eagle Claw Delta 1911 back there, 9mm 1911 over here, and so that's pretty much it for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a great story. We like to tell it, and thought we'd capture it on film and share it with a larger audience. Have a great one.
So what are we saying here now?
All right, I'll start.